The Chronicle of Ellensford begins with a deep dive into the year 1859 in a rural and isolated Pennsylvania. The village, which was once a prosperous community of hundreds of strong men, finds itself reduced to a shadow of what it was due to an unrelenting plague. The despair in the eyes of the survivors is remarkable as the body of Lord Albert, the former magistrate, is prepared for burial. He was the first to show symptoms, and his death marks the end of an era of conventional leadership. Within the magistrate council, the atmosphere is urgent and fearful, as time to act is running out and the disease advances upon the youth. Henry Bartlett emerges in this scenario not as a doctor, but as a man who claims to have mastery over forces that the science of the time does not understand. The dialogue between the magistrates reveals the internal division of the village. Franklin, a voice of caution, openly questions whether Henry's magic could be the true origin of the curse that afflicts them all. Henry counters the accusation with calculated coldness, stating that his mastery is the only defense against the black magic that has already settled in the region. The tension reaches its peak when Henry Bartlett's daughter, Hope, interrupts the meeting to reveal that the telltale marks of the plague have appeared on her body. Faced with the vulnerability of his own lineage, Henry demands total authority as magistrate to proceed with the protective ritual. The other magistrates, viewing death as the only alternative, accept Henry's terms, and the pact is sealed with Franklin's reluctant consent, who speaks for the rest of the people. The ritual occurs under the cold of the winter solstice. Henry explains the mechanics of the curse he is about to invoke. The disease will not simply be eradicated, but rather transferred and concentrated into a physical form. All that is perverse and malignant in the village will rise to take the shape of a horrible beast coming from the depths of hell, the ogre. From that moment on, Ellensford's fate is at the mercy of this creature, which must be fed annually with a human life in order for the other lives to be spared from the plague. A system of chains and shackles is established at the center of the village to restrain the chosen one, who will bear a mark and await their end. The narrative jumps to the year 1969, where the contrast between modernity and the isolation of Ellensford becomes evident. 4 young people known as Mike, Jessica, Terry, and Leah travel through the forest in search of adventure and historical answers. Terry is the driving force of the group, equipped with an authentic map and a book filled with documented cases about the lost village. He recounts strange events, such as the finding of a pristine musket in 1947, and reports from hunters who, in 1964, saw people dressed in Civil War clothing disappearing among the trees. Jessica and Mike, however, remain skeptical, viewing the expedition merely as an excuse to camp, leading to heated discussions within the group. Tragedy strikes when Terry suffers a spectacular fall. Mike, who demonstrates some practical knowledge, realizes that there is a fracture and that the ankle bone can be felt through the skin. They are miles away from any known civilization, and carrying Terry through the dense bush is unfeasible. The decision is made. Terry and Leah will stay behind to pitch the tent, while Mike and Jessica set off in search of a ranger station or shelter. During their search, the two come across a warning sign prohibiting passage and declaring the village closed, a sign they decide to ignore in hopes of finding help. As they advance, they come across a cabin displaying a burned symbol on the wood, a 5-pointed star. Terry, elsewhere in the woods, explains to Leah that the symbol is associated with pre-Christian paganism and the sacred feminine, but the atmosphere is foreboding. Mike and Jessica, driven by necessity, enter the village and witness the beginning of a meeting in the main hall. Henry Bartlett, leading the assembly, reaffirms the need for sacrifice to prevent the village from being consumed again by the pain and suffering of the past plague. The process of choosing the sacrifice is mediated by an object called vacuum, which designates the young Stephen Chandler as this time's offering. Hope, witnessing this, goes into despair, pleading for the people to rise against the beast and end the secret pact, but Henry silences dissent with absolute authority, claiming that the decision is beyond their hands and belongs to tradition. Mike and Jessica watch everything hidden, but their attempt to escape is thwarted when they are surrounded and confronted by the villagers. Henry, upon seeing them, realizes that the presence of outsiders is a variable he can use to his advantage, ignoring the medical assistance requests for Terry and ordering them to be detained immediately. Soon, Mike and Jessica are dragged to the local prison, where they find Stephen Chandler already shackled. The cultural shock is total. The young people attempt to threaten with legal action and mention phones, concepts that are completely strange or irrelevant to the inhabitants of Ellensford. Stephen explains to them that this is not a joke or historical reenactment, but the brutal reality of their lives. He will be offered as sacrificial food for the ogre the following day. Meanwhile, in the magistrate's house, Hope and Franklin discuss the immorality of continuing with the sacrifices, especially now that they involve innocent people from outside the pact. But Henry remains unyielding in his belief that sacrifice is the only means of maintaining prosperity and the lives of all. The confinement of Mike and Jessica in the stone cells of Ellensford reveals the depth of the temporal abyss in which they have fallen. Jessica's initial arrogance, who tried to use her lawyer father's legal status as a shield, quickly dissolves in the face of her captor's medieval indifference. Stephen Chandler, the young man sharing the cell with them, observes with deep melancholy, explaining that terms like law or rights do not cross the village's borders. He tells them about the pact. He was chosen for the year to be offered as sacrificial food to the ogre, a beast that personifies the plague that nearly extinguished the people in 1859. Mike, trying to maintain rationality, suggests that they escape, but Stephen is emphatic in saying that no one can leave Ellensford without facing terrible consequences, as a powerful spell governs every soul present there. As the young people face the terror of imprisonment, the mood at Henry Bartlett's residence is one of pure ideological tension. Hope, the magistrate's daughter, confronts her father about the nature of the regime he has imposed. She reminds him that her own mother was one of the first to die, questioning whether the plague was truly a natural event or something facilitated by Henry's ambitions. Franklin, the magistrate who once hesitated to accept the pact, seeks Henry secretly. He reveals that a growing movement of dissatisfaction among the people exists, previously led by Stephen Chandler himself, who preached resistance against the beast instead of submission. Franklin admits that the village lives a dead man's life, where there is no aging, no real marriages or births, only an endless cycle of fear and death. Franklin openly questions Henry's intentions in detaining the travelers and suggests that they be released. Henry's response is laden with dark pragmatism. He states that keeping the foreigners is a way to protect the people, as they have seen too much. However, Henry's true intention emerges between the lines. He intends to subvert the original ritual, sacrificing the travelers to the beast so that Stephen Chandler, a member of the village, can live for a few more years. Franklin accuses Henry Bartlett of being a manipulator who used the plague to take the title of magistrate and maintain control through terror, but Henry reacts with threats, reminding Franklin that he holds the power to choose who will be chained to the sacrifice post. Away from the village, Terry and Lia's situation becomes desperate. They await the return of Mike and Jessica, unaware that their friends are prisoners. Suddenly, the forest around them begins to come alive in a hostile way. The fearful duo starts to walk and search for shelter, but only finds the entrance closed with the symbol. Terry opens the door and smells a foul odor, joking with his friend, but suddenly, he is grabbed by the monstrous ogre and pulled into the darkness. Lia, terrified, tries to run for her life, but doesn't get far before the creature catches up and finishes her off. Two men from the village, sent by Henry to hunt down the remaining friends, are quickly surprised and killed by the creature, suggesting that the boundary of the ogre's curse has been violated. Henry, realizing that the lair may have been opened prematurely, hastens the preparations, claiming that the ogre will seek revenge against the entire people if a sacrifice is not delivered immediately. Inside the prison, psychological terror escalates as the inhabitants begin to barricade doors and windows with boards and locks, a ritual of collective protection against the coming night and the beast. Henry enters the cell and, with a sinister smile, announces to Stephen that good fortune has looked upon him that night. Stephen, confused, believes he will finally be sacrificed, but Henry orders the guards to take Mike. Mike enters a state of powerless rage, screaming that his friends in the forest will call the police. to which Henry coldly responds that Terry and Laya are already dead at the hands of the beast. Mike is dragged away screaming, while Jessica is kept in custody, watching her reality completely crumble. The twist occurs through Hope's courage. Knowing her father has crossed every moral boundary, she sneaks into the cell area and soon unlocks the bars, freeing Mike and Stephen. Hope leads the group through side paths to avoid Henry's patrols, as the sound of the village bell starts ringing, signaling that the ritual has been interrupted and that the betrayal has been discovered. Henry, upon discovering the empty cells, accuses Franklin of treason and orders an immediate search, stating that without the sacrifice, the pact is broken and the ogre's fury will fall upon every house in Ellensford. Hope leads Mike and Stephen to the village's invisible boundary, where Mike reunites with Jessica, who had managed to temporarily escape her captors. However, freedom is a bitter illusion. Stephen and Hope come to a sudden stop at the boundary line. They explain that as natives of Ellensford bound to the pact, they cannot cross into the outside world without their bodies suffering the consequences of the time that has been stopped. Stephen urges Mike and Jessica to run for their lives as the roar of the beast approaches, indicating that the ogre will not accept the emptiness of the sacrifice post. Part 2 ends with the group divided between individual survival and loyalty to a people cursed by a blood spell. Mike, driven by a mix of corrosive guilt and a purely animal survival instinct, must drag Jessica, who is in a catatonic state, toward the main road. Miraculously, they manage to flag down a passing vehicle and beg to be taken to the nearest police station. At the station, the contrast between the supernatural horror of Ellensford and cold police bureaucracy is absolute and desperate. The local sheriff listens to Mike's account of kidnappings, a medieval jail hidden in the woods, and the existence of a flesh-devouring entity with a skepticism that quickly turns into open mockery. To the police authority, Ellensford is nothing more than an urban myth, a legend of lost people, or a reclusive Amish community that has never been recorded on any official Pennsylvania map. Mike grows increasingly frustrated as the sheriff and his deputy, Henderson, begin to make jokes about the term ogre, treating the young survivors as if they were hallucinating substance users or just irresponsible kids playing a bad prank. Realizing that official help would never cross the forest, Mike makes a drastic decision. He and Jessica take advantage of a moment of distraction from the police to steal a patrol car equipped with high-caliber shotguns and plenty of ammunition. Meanwhile, in the heart of the village, the order imposed by Henry begins to crumble under the weight of its own lie. The people, terrorized by the constant sound of the bell announcing the failure of the sacrifice and the escape of the prisoners, demand immediate answers. Franklin takes the lead in the meeting hall in the momentary absence of Henry, trying to maintain collective calm as the beast's roar resonates with increasing frequency at the forest's edges. Before the entire assembly of villagers, Hope interrupts her father's speech to reveal the truth that has been hidden for over a century. She discloses that she found the ancient book of records and spells, exposing that the original plague of 1859 was manipulated or even intensified by Henry to force the community to accept his authority as magistrate and spiritual protector. Henry, in a moment of brutal honesty and desperation, admits that his acts were motivated by the desire to save Hope's life, even if the price was the eternal condemnation of every soul in Ellensford to fear. He confesses that the pact granted him eternal life, but Hope confronts him, saying that he did not give life to the people, only a zombie existence surrounded by annual murders. This revelation breaks the last pillar of respect the villagers had for him, plunging the village into a productive chaos of revolt. The people cease to behave like sacrificial cattle and begin to organize into a desperate militia. Franklin and Hope take the lead in organizing the defense, using protective knowledge that Henry always tried to keep under his exclusive control. Meanwhile, in the forest, Henry soon encounters the monstrous creature and believes he can tame it with his magic. However, he is quickly attacked and killed. Hope distributes candles prepared with specific herbs and explains that the circle of blessed salt is the only spiritual barrier capable of containing the physical manifestation of the beast, which is nothing more than the incarnation of the very disease of the past. She instructs every man and woman to keep the burning flame in their windows and doors, reciting the protection chant, "Within this circle, all that is material and human shall be safe." Far from the candlelight, Mike and Jessica face technical difficulties in the dense forest. The patrol car becomes stuck in a deep mud pit, forcing them to continue the rest of the way on foot. Mike prepares the shotguns, checking each cartridge, aware that conventional firearms may be useless against an entity that defies the laws of physics and biology, but determined to use everything he has. He confesses to Jessica that he is not going back, merely out of a sense of duty, but because he recognizes that Hope risked her own eternity to give them a chance, and now he must use his advantage as an outsider to tilt the balance against the ogre. At the center of the village, Hope's strategy is put into action with desperate precision. The circle of blessed salt and the magical candles become the only line of defense between civilization and the beast. Mike, now armed with the police shotgun, positions himself in a strategic spot, knowing that his presence as a foreigner makes him the ogre's primary target, and consequently, the ideal bait for Hope's trap. The roar of the creature resonates with an intensity that makes the very earth tremble, signaling that the broken pack demands a bloody reckoning. The final confrontation begins when the ogre emerges from the shadows of the forest, a mass of putrid flesh and hellish fury that ignores physical barriers. Mike assumes the role of bait, running through the center of the village and firing shotgun rounds that, while not killing the beast, manage to injure it and draw its full attention. Mike screams for the creature to come after him, allowing Hope and Franklin to gain the necessary time to initiate the ritual to reverse Henry's magic. As Mike fights to survive the beast's attacks, Hope and the people of Ellensford recite the counterspell with powerful unison. The ogre, sensing that its source of power, the very plague immortalized, is being drained, launches a last desperate attack against Hope, but using the spells she has learned, she counterattacks and defeats the creature, destroying it completely, symbolizing the definitive end of the plague that had tormented the village for over a century. A sepulchral silence falls over Ellensford, but it is not a silence of peace, but of closure. With the death of the ogre and the breaking of the spell, time, which had been held back by Henry since 1859, advances with a devastating force over everything belonging to that soil. Mike and Jessica watch in horror as the village begins to disintegrate before their eyes. Hope looks at Mike one last time with a look of deep gratitude and relief. Before them, the young Hope begins to rapidly age in a glowing aura, and like everyone from her village, disappears into eternal rest.